Black Crows. There is a proverb amongst the people of the Klein Karoo. The fun begins where the tarred road ends. Henny and Jacobus sat silently opposite each other in their white Nissan 4x4 police van. Jacobus was still waking up, and he was driving. Henny, a red-haired, freckled-faced Boer, looked out of the window towards the western horizon. This was their ritual. They would keep silent for about 30 minutes. Then the conversation would start. The two policemen did this patrol twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays, between Christmas and Easter, when the N1 between Cape Town and Johannesburg was less busy. They would drive and patrol Kleinstraat and Matthiasfontein, a distance of 68 kilometers. At an average speed, this trip would take them 45 minutes, though Henny, the younger of the two, held the record. He drove that distance in 25 minutes, once upon a time. They often took far longer than 45 minutes, because they tried to drag those 2 days out for as long as possible. Nothing in the Karoo moved, except falcons and kites seen high above on a clear day. A casual eye would not notice the little shrubs and bush unless there was roadkill. This Thursday morning would prove different. They began talking much sooner, for the first strange thing that alighted upon them was a solitary black crow. Henny was the first to notice it. "Look!" he suddenly exclaimed, pointing straight ahead to the road, his blue-tipped finger touching the windscreen. Jacobus jolted out of his thoughts and bent his long neck looking at what Henny was on about. "Fuck!" was his only reply. It was too late. The crow was already upon them. It landed with a thud on the windscreen, its long, thin talons tugging at the wipers, squawking like a crazy clown. Jacobus was an excellent driver, but that took him by surprise. He swerved the tin can, and it snaked across the road. "Squirt the thing with water, man," commanded Henny. Jacobus acted immediately, but it did not help. He brought the van back to normality, turned on his wiper blades, and honked frantically, but nothing helped. Then suddenly, gone. The crow just upped and left. "Donners, what the hell was that?" exclaimed Jacobus, fully awake and alive. He rubbed his eyes, sat forward, and leaned on the steering wheel, then looked at Henny. Soon after Toes River, the crow came diving straight for the windscreen again. Jacobus flicked a button on the dashboard, switching on the emergency vehicle lights, but it was for naught. He then tried sirens. Nothing could dissuade the crow. Henny wound down his window, stuck himself into the wind, and blasted his pepper spray towards the crow. "Skiton vrek!" shouted Jacobus. Henny bobbed back into his seat, took out his Vector Z88 9mm pistol, bobbed back out of the window, held on for dear life, and shot at the persistent crow. Ruckus. It was ruckus. Sirens blared, cutting through the still morning air, bullets winnowing through the glass. The ruckus of man, and the ruckus of crows. Then another bullet ricocheted and hit the windscreen, cracking it like lightning and impeding Jacobus's view. He slammed on the brakes and brought the van to a halt in the middle of the road. In the middle of nowhere. Jumped out, looked up and down the road with his hands on his hips. "Put that damn noise off," he shouted at Henny. Unpredictably, for all this seemed like a long, long time to them, there was silence. That silence was so bittersweet after the recoil of alienation. The only sound was that of the van idling. Henny got in behind the wheel and turned it off. "Did you get it, Henny?" asked Jacobus, hopefully after a while. "Get what?" replied Henny, walking to the verge of the road. "Fuck, Henny. Did you shoot the crow? Is it dead?" "I hope not," he replied apologetically. "It would be a bad foreboding." "What?" exclaimed Jacobus again. "Vorgovel," replied Henny emphatically. "Please don't start with your shit." Henny did not reply, but walked next to the verge of the road, He was looking for something. He did not expect to find the dead body of the crow. He had no idea why he was looking at the shrubs and karoo grass. Then his eyes caught a glimpse of something. Something strange. "Hey, Jacobus, have a look at this." Jacobus walked over reluctantly. Quickly, the fruitless light of hope sprung into his eyes. He asked, "Did you find the crow?" "No," came the cold reply. He found Henny crouching on his haunches. He was pointing to tracks. Car tracks. Or was it a van? Clear as day, it led straight off the road, broken in places by the bush clumps and little shrubs. "And look," said Henny. He got up. "Look at these 2 iron rods." Round river stones had been stacked one upon the other. The rods hold it up. Very clever. It's a marking. We drive right by it each week, never noticing. The many-colored painted stones camouflage it well when you are not looking. Henny touched them. And look, it's bushman paint. They use white paint from clay or bird droppings, and black from manganese minerals and charcoal. They never use blue and green. The blood of eland is often mixed with the pigments. Though here, strange enough, every second stone is blue with golden stars upon it. Strange indeed. Jacobus was again in policeman mode. "And how do you know all of this?" "My mother," he replied. Jacobus jumped over the fence and walked 100 meters. There were no signs of tire tracks. And he followed in a northerly direction, and nothing. They each retraced their steps by walking away from the road in the directions that they had not checked before. And still nothing. Jacobus stood still. He was leaning on the fence, then got back over. He waved his finger at Henny. "Fuck," he exclaimed. You must be enjoying this, Henny." Henny looked at him broodingly with a sly smile, then asked, "What on earth do you mean, Jacobus?" Jacobus threw his hands up in the air, replying, This conspiracy." Henny laughed. "There is no conspiracy, Jacobus. This is the Klein Karoo. This is Azania, the land of our forefathers, land of the Impi, the Zosha, the Bushmen, the playground of the shape-shifting Khoisan. No place on earth has such a strange history as this land." He pointed at Jacobus, his arm ramrod straight, and finger pointing at his superior. "Let me quote an old Zulu Sanusi, who said that the Africans have been coexisting, really coexisting, with alien beings from the stars for tens of thousands of years. You know what I'm talking about, Jacobus." Jacobus did not reply. He only shook his head in agreement. Henny was right. "What shall we do? Call it in? Tell Malima?" The reply was exact, immediate. "No, we report nothing. There is nothing to report. What you want to call in crows and dead-end tire tracks?" "Yeah, but look at our windshield," replied Jacobus. "We will find something. I know we will. Jacobus, be patient. I'm walking in further. You wait here for me." Henny fingered his walkie-talkie on his shoulder, then took off walking straight from where the tire tracks ended. Jacobus called after him. "It's a Ford." Henny stopped. "What?" "I said, it's a Ford half-ton pickup." Henny did not bother to question. He knew that Jacobus's love for old cars, or any for that matter, was second to none. Jacobus got into his police tin can and drove it to the side of the road. He left the lights flashing in the silent midday air. He could see for miles. The sky was clear blue, that blue of August that is ready to welcome spring. He took out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag, then got out of the van. He watched Henny walking until Henny's slender figure sank behind a dell. He heard some crackle in his radio, and he answered, "Jacobus, Jacobus, come in." He could hear that Henny was out of breath. "Yeah, I'm listening." "Oh, you won't believe it. Where is the closest jacaranda tree in this region that you remember? Jacobus thought for a moment. Henny waited in the silence, toying the fresh jacaranda petal between his fingers. He brought it to his nose. It had a strange, pleasant fragrance that he could not place. The radio crackled again. In Worcester came the reply. Yes, said Henny. And Worcester is roughly, plus, minus, 98 kilometers from our current location. I'm holding one single petal from a jacaranda in my hand. It's fresh. It's still moist. Don't you find this strange? Donners, Henny, everything about this day is strange. Finding that damn petal only adds more to the intrigue, or someone's demise. Jacobus caught himself replying. There was silence on the radio for a moment. By my reckoning, I am some 3 kilometers from you at present. I am hungry and thirsty. Henny, called Jacobus. Look, I must tell you, I have no idea what to do or tell you. Maybe you should come back. I can't just ride through the fence. Who does this land belong to? Henny did not answer. Jacobus knew he had no reason to panic. They had been in worse situations before. Further apart, though, he confessed to himself in the silence of his solitude. This was indeed strange. So he sat in his van, waiting, smoking. The Klein Karoo is pan-flat. Mountains or outcrops appear suddenly on the landscape. Shrubs and little bossies grew in profusion with its red soil, making countless paths. But the further Henny walked, the lusher things appeared. After some 50 minutes, he had covered 9 kilometers by his reckoning. The land floated gently up and down, with the next rise never higher than 4 feet in elevation. There it was, the thing which he was looking for, the evidence, the object which would change everything about that day, about his life, their lives. Before him, on a lovely patch of green grass, green as Ireland, there parked all by itself, was a 1949 Ford half-ton pickup. He walked around it, studying it. This is impossible, he thought. It looked brand new. He bent down to look at the silver hubcaps. It was polished, and he could see his face reflected in them. The passenger window was turned right down. He pushed his head inside, closed his eyes, and drank deeply from the old tan leather seats. Annonce, a fragrance from childhood. Oh, how he loved that smell. He returned from his reverie and popped his head out and studied the immaculate paintwork. The pickup was sprayed in a copper gold. It was plain and simple. 2 long silver phallic exhaust pipes protruded beside each door. Henny could not believe it. He plonked himself down on the sleek running boards and reached for the walkie-talkie on his shoulder. He breathed deeply into it, calling, sighing. Jacobus, Jacobus, come. Come in, Jacobus. Jacobus ran towards the van, dove in on the passenger's side, reached for his shirt, for a strange warm balmy air had arisen, enough to warrant him walking around topless. He scrambled for the walkie-talkie, shouting into it. Fuck, Donners, Henny. You really had me in a panic. I found something, came the reply. Then laughter. Henny laughed and laughed, then spoke again. I found it, and you will not believe your eyes. You can call Malima, your 1949 Ford half-ton pickup. I am sitting on the running board, brand spanking new. No, exclaimed Jacobus. It cannot be, it cannot be. Wait, said Henny. I'll prove it. Henny walked around to the driver's seat and turned on the ignition. Can you hear it, Jacobus? Jacobus listened. It was like being a little boy again. That sound was unmistakable. Are there any habitats there? Houses? Sheds? Anything, Henny? Henny turned off the ignition. There is nothing here. I walked 9 kilometers. There's not a single track or tire mark." Henny looked over his shoulder out the rear window. His mouth dropped. He got out of the truck and looked up at two large sculptures, statues of two riverine rabbits, at least 18 feet tall. The likeness was uncanny. Suspended from their shoulders was a swine bridge some 300 meters in length, tattered and torn. Henny, are you still there?" Henny walked slowly toward the two eidolons and looked up at them. They were old, he could tell. They were made of wood, and they were covered in blue lichen, dry as a bone. The sculptures were incredibly accurate, the likeness perfect. Henny fumbled with his cell phone, took several photos of the riverine rabbits, the pickup, and sent it to Jacobus. He got back on the walkie-talkie. "Jacobus, check your phone." Jacobus reached for his phone, tapped the screen, and voila! He slid the images back and forth, back and forth. The evidence was before his eyes, yet there was some part of him that denied it. He shook his head from side to side and answered on his walkie-talkie. "Fuck, Henny." He glanced at his watch. It was 3 p.m. exactly. He looked up the road, this way and that. Not a car in sight, not a farm tractor, nothing. All was dead except for the stillness that filled his ears and flooded his sight. He wiped his brow. He had started to perspire. "Is it hot where you are, Henny?" he found himself asking. "Strangely, yes," came a quick reply. "Strange so, in fact. Cobus, it feels like summer where I am." Jacobus shook his head again. "Can you hold out a little longer? I'm calling Malima." Henny returned to the open doors of the pickup and reached for the cubbyhole. Inside, stored cool and fresh, were 2 large golden globes. One would think that when Henny opened that cubbyhole, he had turned the doors of summer on their hinges. The fragrance of deep summer was in those apples. He took a large bite. He savored it. They were sweet, sweet as summer. The taste was an infinite charm. It was a moment to rejoice. He got up from the seat and looked towards the 2 18-foot structures. Then, there at its feet, 2 fat riverine rabbits were nibbling at something. They had no care in the world, not scared at all. It seemed that they had been blown in, and summer had come with them. The air was filled with mystery, impregnated with wonder. Henny suddenly thought of his mother. She was an avid reader, and she always said, "At first encounter, the Karoo might seem arid, desolate, and unforgiving. But to those who know it, it is a land of secret beauty and infinite variety." He chewed on the apple, then flung a part of it towards the rabbits. One sat up on its backside, jumped forward, took a piece of the apple in its paws and ate it. Henny gawked at its animation. He could swear she lifted her paw to say thank you. That beautiful 4-legged person was on the brink of extinction, endangered since 1981. Henny was surprised to even see them at all, with only 500 mature rabbits left in the entire region. Without a thought, he dove into the second apple. It felt to him that some great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. He removed his jacket, unbuttoned his shirt, and walked towards the bridge. He stared at it for a long while. The 2 rabbits came close to his feet and looked up at him. He bent down and shared his apple with them. He was gobsmacked. The crackle and call of his name on the walkie-talkie sent them scrambling. He never saw them again, that entire long day. "Henny," called Jacobus, "is everything okay with you?" "I'm good. Fixed up. Found 2 large apples. Gosh, were they sweet." He broke into a boyish laugh. "I shared it with 2 riverine rabbits." "What?" exclaimed Jacobus. "Bushman rabbits? No, that's impossible. There can't be more than 100 of those left. No ways." "Well, your walkie-talkie just scared them off. They were at least 3 feet tall." "Okay, hang 10. I'm calling Malima now."